All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very much. Going to ask that the meeting please come to order. The chambers would please come to order. Thank you all very much. I'm going to ask that we try and be a little flexible today because we are going to manage here in spite of the fact that Supervisor Chavez, the second member of our two-member committee, has a conflict. She's trying to be in two places at once. So what we're going to do today, and I'm looking over to the County Council, is we're going to operate as a, quote, committee of the whole, which means I am it, committee-wise. That means in the absence of a quorum, which absence we will establish in just a moment or two, we cannot take formal action today because we don't have a quorum of the committee. I don't think that should be a problem because a number of these are to simply receive items, and what we will do, because even receiving an item could be an action that we need to take with a quorum, is we'll simply continue any items today, heard today, to our next meeting, and we'll take formal action on them at that time. But we'll hear some of them today, the ones that aren't on the consent calendar. So if you can just bear with me, I'm going to walk through how that's going to work, because we'll have items on consent, items that will be continued or deferred, and then items which we will hear today, even though, as I say, they will not be formally acted on until a subsequent meeting. So, items for consent today, in addition to those on our agenda, would be items 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. I'm going to repeat those. Items 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. So I'm going to ask you all to be mindful of those as potential consent calendar items. And I know we have staff here from various departments and agencies, so be thinking about whether or not you would like to present on those, notwithstanding the fact that they're recommended for consent. That rarely happens, but I want to make sure that we give people that opportunity. Then, by the same token, we will continue to either our 9/27, September 27th meeting, or our October 11th meeting, the following three items, and they are items number 5, which is the management audit of facilities and fleet building operations, item 6, the surveillance policies, and item 10, compensation of our elected officials. That, of course, is the sheriff, the district attorney, and the assessor. So the expectation today is that those three items will be deferred to our next meeting, whether that is the 27th of September or the 11th of October. That would leave us with 4 items to be heard today, and they would be item number 4, the Registrar of Voters report relating to the 2017 management audit. And again, my intention would be to hear those as a committee of the whole, meaning a one-person committee in this instance. Item number 7, the progress report regarding the Sustainability Master Plan. Item number 8, the option to streamline TSS hiring. And item number 17, which is a report on county elections and voting security and privacy, which is ongoing, particularly as we head into the election. So those would be the 4 items we would hear today. Now, having shared all that with you and hoping that that gives folks a moment or two to sort of sort through the lay of the land today, and again, I appreciate your willingness and ability to be flexible, we'll start with the call to order.
Supervisor Chavez, absent. Supervisor Simitian?
Present.
We do not have a quorum.
Thank you. We do not have a quorum, and again, Supervisor Chavez is on county business, and so we will act as a committee of the whole today and defer final action on anything until a subsequent meeting. That being said, we will go to item number 2, which is public comment. I do have 2 speaker cards under public comment, and we will entertain those from first Susan Bassey, to be followed second by Scott Largent. And good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Susan Bassey, and as you know, I have been investigating this county related to issues in our family court. I have reviewed several of your internal audit management reports, and you seem to spend a lot of money on these reports and then don't necessarily take the action that you should be taking. One of the concerns I have is that the county is consistently failing to follow rules and laws in this county that makes it non-compliant with state and federal grants. For example, California Rule of Court number 10.613. That rule requires that before our local courts adopt a rule about how attorneys behave in courtrooms or courthouses or treat issues related to fairness in our courts, our county has an opportunity to look at it. Jeff Smith has an opportunity to look at it. Our county district attorney has an opportunity to look at it, and our public defender. You're not in compliance with doing anything. The Attorney General also looks at that. As you know, a year ago, Joe, Scott Largent brought to your attention an order that Patricia Lucas had written on her own that most believe was unconstitutional. I'd like to take this to a third grade level so that you all understand that. Yesterday, I went to McDonald's and I purchased this box of megaphones. These are Happy Meal toys that are given out by McDonald's. Superman is actually one of my favorite superheroes, my children's too. The children are excited to get these Happy Meal toys. This is a staple in most American homes. Children look forward to the Happy Meal toys and they run down and get them. If a child in Santa Clara County takes out this megaphone and uses it in the city of San Jose, they would be in violation of a Muni Code that put Scott Largent on trial for a week. If they use this within 25 feet of our courthouse based on Patricia Lucas legislating from the bench, they would be arrested. So right now, you not doing your job has resulted in McDonald's selling toys to children that could get them arrested. Unknowing parents could go this weekend and get their children a Happy Meal, get them a megaphone. That child takes that megaphone, marches with their parent on the way to court, and talks into this megaphone, which is battery operated. And Patricia Lucas, as she showed on May 1st, 2017, will arrest those children. So Happy Meals are now selling toys that are contraband in Silicon Valley. Toy megaphones, like Scott Largent was arrested for on May 1st, 2017, will arrest our children. That's what you not doing your job has resulted in. You haven't controlled Patricia Lucas. You put her on a committee. She votes for the district attorney's budget and the sheriff's budget. And she had Scott Largent arrested on an order she made up and pulled out from under her robe that could now arrest all the children in Santa Clara County who use this Happy Meal toy. I didn't see that in any of your audit reports.
Our next speaker is Mr. Scott Largent.
Delay everything. My bad. Okay. Dad's toy. Okay, we'll get this rocking right now. I got to buy, Scott Largent. Good afternoon, everybody. Yesterday I went and bought my own Happy Meal. So I first experienced myself. Then I was able today to buy my daughter her own Happy Meal, and I was able to buy it across the street from the visitation provider. So I was very, very excited about this. And it's you're kind of playing the lottery if you'll get the actual megaphone in here, and I scored. I got the megaphone, and I was very, very excited about this because at my visits, I bring my daughter's little megaphone, and I also show her what Dad has to do to be in her life. This is what I have to do, and with this failed system, I want to make sure my daughter's ready to fight to be in my life. This is pathetic what's going on here. Joe, I kept coming forward trying to get you guys to get involved with this stuff. Are you guys going to start arresting children in Santa Clara County? DC Comics has worked with McDonald's to start providing these kids' toys. Patricia Lucas, over at any of our court facilities now, can start arresting children. I think it would be really great if we can get the legal team from DC Comics, McDonald's, to start stepping up to the plate to basically tell Santa Clara County that they need to stop stepping on the rights of fathers fighting for their kids, and same with children using kids' toys. My megaphone that I used that day did not even have a battery in it. Okay? It was my grandmother's little kid's thing that she keeps on the side of her table. Now, my grandma likes that little megaphone when she's got to holler at me in the kitchen. She would like it back, okay? That's sitting in an evidence locker over at our sheriff's department. And remember, I'm on the do not complaint calendar right now for my arrest on May 1st. Santa Clara County has up to a year to prosecute me. They have not dropped the charges. They still have not changed that order, Joe. Sooner or later, we've got to get the blinders off, we've got to pull the cotton swabs out, and we've got to stop shaking people's hands in the hallway and acting like you care. I want a politician that's going to step to the plate, Joe, and I'm going to start lighting a fire under you, Joe. I've been out to Palo Alto, okay, and you know I'm really big on the homeless thing. What I'm thinking right now, because San Jose is a damn failure, that we need to start getting the homeless community on that 522 bus, and we need to start getting them out to Palo Alto where they're compassionate to the homeless. We need to start getting some trucking companies, start bringing all these motorhomes out there. They've got plenty of room out there. They're compassionate. They have restrooms for the poor. These are all things that I just wish you would pay attention to, Joe. I'm just concerned. I grew up in your district, Joe. I just don't know why. I don't know why my thoughts, everything I'm doing, I don't know why it's thrown out. I mean, I'm a little person, but please stand up for the community. Please stand up for my daughter, myself. This is just wrong. So thank you, everybody. And thank you, McDonald's, for making my daughter's day. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Let me just confirm with the clerk of the board that we have no other cards from folks who wish to speak under public comment. We do not. All right. That being the case, as I mentioned earlier, the expectation is that in addition to our agendized items, and I'm at item 3 now on our agenda, the agendized items for the consent calendar, in addition to the ones that were contained on our published agenda, items 21 and 22, that we would take items 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16 as consent calendar items as well. Let me just ask if there are either staff members who are here who would like to speak to those issues or members of the public who would like to speak on the consent calendar. Ms. Bassey, did I see you raising your hand in the back? Then please come forward. Thank you very much. All right, that means in the absence of comment there, I don't see anyone else, so we will simply take these items as consent calendar items, again, understanding that if there is action to be taken, even the receipt of a report, that formal action will likely be taken at one of our next 2 meetings when we have a quorum present and we can take that action. And then, as I indicated as well, without objection, we will defer 3 items that the management audit of facilities and fleet building operations, the compensation of elected officials, and the surveillance items until one of those next 2 meetings, and we'll agendize those again properly. That leaves us with just 4 items today, and those 4 items are, again, the Registrar of Voters report relating to the 2017 management audit, and the progress report on sustainability, and the option to streamline TSS hiring, and the report on county election and voting security. So I think we'll take just a few seconds, let people who can and would like to vacate the chambers go ahead. All right, the first item of business is item number remaining on our agenda today, and again, acting as a committee of the whole, is to receive the report from the Office of the Registrar of Voters relating to the management audit of the Registrar of Voters. This item was held from a previous meeting, but we will have the conversation today, and then I believe that the only action called for is to simply receive the report. I do have some questions and comments, appreciated the document. And then we'll take the formal action to have received the report at one of our next 2 meetings. Dr. Smith, do you have someone from your staff who's going to lean in on this one?
Shannon Boucher, from the ROV, is going to do it.
Great. If we could ask you to introduce your colleague as well, just for the record, even though we all know you.
Sure. I have with me Matt Morales, our Assistant Registrar of Voters.
Wonderful. Would you like to offer any introductory comments, or would you like me to just weigh in with questions? What's your preference? However you'd like to proceed.
Well, I would like to do whatever preference you would like to go first with. I am prepared to speak to the two items we're not implementing with the short summary and a short summary on the uncounted ballots and the ballot return methods the committee previously asked for answers on. So whatever you prefer.
Well, why don't I ask questions, and if I've left anything unquestioned that you wanted to comment on, but I'm guessing there's going to be a connect between these items. And before we get started, we do have a card from Mr. Largent on this item. So, Mr. Largent, if you'd like to come up, now is the time. Let me turn to the clerk and ask if the clerk would please grab.
Sorry. Yeah, Susan, you got to put them up here.
Mr. Largent, go right ahead.
Oh, okay, great. Oh, we might want to do the clock then. We'll like Scott to stop at 2 minutes. Thank you. Ready when you are. Okay. All right, great. Scott Largent. I had the pleasure of actually going to the Register of Voters office. I first went out there with my friend Maria Hernandez that was running for supervisor. And it was a neat thing to go out there, and then I also went through the process of registering to vote. The staff and the people in there were very kind. It was a neat process to kind of experience. We got pictures out in front of there. They gave me neat little pins and stuff that I wear around here. It just seemed like a really, really tight agency there. It was kind of weird because I read a lot in the paper, and they're kind of slinging mud at the Register of Voters. I was just very confused. It's just not like night and day. My experience was really good. When I started looking more into when Lori Smith and John Hirakawa and the other crew that were running for sheriff, I started to kind of track online when they were paying their fees, their fines, getting their signatures together. I wanted to see what was going on. I wanted to see who was paying what. I've got to learn everything about everything in this county. What was really confusing is I thought it was rigged at first. I thought that John Hirakawa was not actually going to run for sheriff. He did not pay his filing fee until the Friday. Now, remember, this is not the recent thing that's in the news right now. This is the one prior to everybody running. He had the signatures submitted a week before, but he paid the money, I believe it was $2,800, that Friday. So that, in my eyes, is like doing the book report the night before it's due. And that was, I was worried. I thought they were rigging it. I thought Lori was kind of in it with John, and he just didn't want to pay the money. He'd back out at the end, and she'd win the election. So I am not a fan of John Hirakawa for that. I have been a critic of Lori Smith in the Sheriff's Department, but it changed my mind when she protected people's First Amendment rights and actually dealt with my criticism for 2 years. And that's what's shocking. And Lori did not order deputies to come to the house. It was the judicial system of our judges that were doing this, not Lori Smith. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a card that doesn't indicate a name. We don't require a name, so if you're the person who would like to speak on the unnamed card for item number 4, please come forward.
Thank you. That was probably me. I wasn't doing my homework. Scott will get on me for that later. I, too, would like to talk about the Register of Voters. I had the experience of, as you know, in the media, we rely on information that is publicly available, and the Register of Voters has been extremely helpful. In fact, it was interesting when the issues of Judge Persky's recall came to light. I think I found more information than was ever reported to the county about what that cost taxpayers. I found the information that Judge Persky fought the recall through our courts. He clearly had an in with all the judges, and every single lawyer and judge in this county and about 50 other counties also contributed to the no on the recall. The voters spoke, and that cost the county a lot of money. You have a problem in this county with our judges. The problem has gone back for a long time. If Hirakawa is able to miss deadlines that a politician should know and be able to comply with, and suddenly a judge ruling from this county comes up with a favorable ruling to keep him in the election, you need to investigate that for improper public corruption. It will be improper governmental activity. Judge Persky did not necessarily get favorable rulings because he had to go through the recall. He tried to stop it through the judicial system. We have a democracy that is carefully balanced with 3 wings of government, and the 4th wing of government is our free press. And we're going to keep watching, and we're going to keep checking. And right now, you're not going to throw the clerks from that nice little office where they're very helpful on information that the public is entitled to know in order to rig the system and rig the elections. That's illegal, and your complicitness, your indifference, and your inefficiency is not going to be accepted in our elections. Thank you.
And let me just confirm with the clerk, I believe that is the last card we have on item number 4, Registrar. All right, then I'm going to lean in and let me just say to the team from the Registrar's Office, because we're a committee of one today, I'm going to try and make this a little more informal, a little more conversational. Feel free to interrupt me. That may be the only time you ever hear me say that. And I'm going to feel free to engage with you a little bit. And please bear with me if I ask you to stop for a moment because I want to follow up on a point, okay? So, looking at Ms. Soloff and obviously from the management audit team, if you want to weigh in on any of these items, please do. Typically what we do, particularly 1 year later, and it is 1 year later after the, the audit was released, take a look at how we're doing on issues of follow-up, compliance, agreement, disagreement. Really only a couple of areas here where there were disagreements at all, and let me just walk through those very quickly. I think the first one is on packet page 8 for those of you who are using the packet page, and that is page 3 of 10 in the staff report. This is, and just one more number, recommendation or 4.2 or section 4.2. The issue was whether or not we might improve the mail ballot envelope to make voter fraud less likely, ideally by creating an envelope that must be signed across the enclosure. I have read the response of the Registrar of Voters. They've indicated some other improvements to the envelope that they're trying to make at the same time. Ms. Sullivan, I got to say, I find the comments about the envelope persuasive at this point, as does the auditor. And so I just think what I'll say is I think you're on a good track. I think the envelope's getting better. You know, I'm sure to people who aren't familiar with your process, the envelope's getting better seems like a somewhat cryptic or not terribly important phrase, but actually, given our number of vote-by-mail voters, it's a pretty important set of issues. I'm fine with it. So unless there's anything else you'd like to say, and if you do, please do, because that's what we're here for today.
I just would like the clerk to give you a copy of our new envelope with the tactile holes for the disabled to sign without any assistance. That's all.
And just for the record, I'm not receiving a ballot, right?
No,
Okay,
it's empty.
great.
That's
Great.
the other benefit of the holes is that we can see if there's a ballot inside.
Got it. All right. Thank you very much. And I'm going to share that with Ms. Soloff, who I'm guessing has seen one of these before. But that takes us then to item number 4.3, which was a recommendation to purchase the signature verification software to speed up the verification process for vote-by-mail ballots, as well as conducting an outreach campaign to voters to update their signatures to make such equipment more effective. And I gather from reading the response from the registrar that the challenge here is in part the poor quality of electronic signatures given the technology that is used in many instances, that's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that people's signatures change after 20, 30, or 40 years. Are those the two major hurdles?
Correct. And one additional, besides the electronic signatures, is the quality of the scanning of the signatures that they, did 10 years ago, et cetera. So prior scans, technology, and changes over time, yes.
And there is reference in item 4.3 in the report, and thank you for that, to efforts on the part of the Registrar of Voters for an outreach campaign to update voters' signatures. And presumably, if you were able to get them to update their signature, that would make it easier to do a match and would involve fewer false problems. Am I getting this right, more or less?
That's correct.
And I'm just curious, what kind of an outreach program are we talking about that, I mean, I'm just trying to imagine your message of, please come down and sign your voter registration file again. How would,
Right.
what's that look like?
Well, I actually have a better suggestion
Okay.
than doing the outreach campaign. The prior plan was to look at doing a mailing to all voters to update their voter signature. So, but then after we did this study and looked into this more about the quality of signatures, and the biggest issue against that is the electronic registrations with the DMV. So at the DMV, they're not signing paper, they're, what do you call those boxes? Like where you, like you're at Safeway and you put your signature on with a pen or your finger signature pad. That's what they're using to capture the signatures at the DMV. So, and because online voter registration, now that it's been in numerous years, we have thousands upon thousands of registrations with those electronic signatures. That will continue to be an increase in the future from the electronic signatures. And in addition, now that DMV automatic registration has kicked in this year, again, it'll be another increase in the DMV signatures. So what we, so that's more of a reason not just to do a paper mailing to all voters in the county. So what we've decided to do, and we implemented it in June, was all of the signatures for the voters that did not match in June, so they returned to vote by mail ballot, and their signature on their envelope did not match our signature of record. For the first time, and we will do this in all future elections, we mailed a letter immediately to the voter stating that their signature on the ballot didn't match our record, and asked them to complete a form and put their signature down for us, mail that back to us, or bring it in. And we scanned that in as their new signature, and we were actually able to count an additional 260 ballots for this election. 260 people returned those out of 550 letters that were sent. So we will implement that again for November and future elections, because that is our biggest reason, really, looking at one of the larger reasons for a person's ballot being challenged because the signature didn't match. So we're starting in with this piece, this new idea, and focusing in on the ones that actually are in that situation that didn't match. So
Okay.
that's the plan at this time.
Let me turn again to Ms. Sola from the Rose Organization. It seems like a sensible plan to me, Ms. Sola. Thoughts?
I agree. I believe that you said you were emailing them, correct?
Not emailing, both hard copy letters and emails.
Okay, that was going to be my thought, was if you were just doing it by email to also send a letter. But given that, I think it's a reasonable solution.
All right, thank you very much. That takes us, and I'm actually going to ask, even though this is one where it indicates the department has begun implementation of the recommendation, to 4.4. And the recommendation was to determine the appropriate level and type of voter outreach to implement under SB 450. And the outreach campaign should advise voters to return their mail ballots as soon as possible to potentially reduce the number of ballots that are returned on election day. And I have expressed before concerns, and I just want to underscore them again today. I'm taking advantage of this opportunity to say, if we move down this path, which is a judgment ultimately for our board, as I recall, I am anxious about our ability to turn on a dime, if you will, and in a single election communicate to a county of 2 million people that there's no such thing as a polling place anymore, because we won't have conventional polling places if we go down that path, as I understand it. We'll have voting centers. Have I got my terminology correct?
You're correct.
So, and because I'm the only board member here today, I can get away with on the one hand and on the other hand. On the one hand, this will be easier, I think, than it might have been, given that 70+% of our voters now are vote by mail anyway. So if they haven't been going to their polling place, it won't be that much of a change, I'm guessing, for them, except for the folks who've been dropping them off, who are going to, wonder about that. But for, 25, 30% of the public who still has been voting at their polling places, the fact that there literally will not be a polling place as it has historically been known, I think is going to be a very abrupt change in the absence of extraordinary outreach. And two observations. One is, it's been my experience over the years that no matter how much outreach you do, the thing that you think you've told people 6 times is the thing that they say, I never heard about it. And the other is that, candidly, outreach is not something that the county generally is particularly adept at, that we have lots of skills. I mean, we've got people who, save people's lives, who conduct difficult elections, who, are on the cutting edge of the legal field and so on and so forth. But just reaching people out there in a great big county like this one and connecting with them in a way that really takes hold is something that I think we struggle with in a lot of our departments and agencies here at the county. So could you share a little bit more of your thinking today about, what does that look like if we go down that path, understanding that we still have some decisions to make?
Well, in general, of course, there will be your normal advertising methods. We will be using Facebook to get information out, Twitter, our advertising campaigns. We do bus ads, we do print ads in multiple languages, in bilingual, in monolingual, in like Chinese, Vietnamese, Spanish, Tagalog, and other newspapers. Of course, our newspapers, county, the big one like San Jose Mercury News. We're also going to be developing a language advisory accessory committee, and a LAC and a VAC, a voting accessibility committee. So with those also, we're working with CBOs, community-based organizations. Already am developing a list of, for instance, I had a woman contact me who wants to be part of the committee, wants to help us get advertising and get word out, along with like the legal and voters. So we do plan on utilizing community organizations to help us get out the words that we'll be doing, in addition, of course, to the press releases and news media. And we'll be doing 2 forms of communication before the election to each voter, which is part of what is required in SB 450 at a minimum there. So it's coming at different social media, print ads, television, mailings directly to the voters. And we are, in the next few months, we're expecting reports to come out from at least one, if not more, of the 5 counties that implemented VCA in this June primary. And we will be looking at what outreach they did, where they see what worked and what didn't work. So we're trying to attack it.
Excuse the interruption. Let me just say, and frankly, I had just wasn't mindful of the fact that we do have the experience of these other counties, and I really do want to make sure we benefit from their experience. So I'm delighted to hear you mention that. And I think one of the struggles you're going to have is they may think they know what was the thing that worked, but if you've done a dozen different strategies, trying to figure out which ones worked and which one didn't, I think is going to be a struggle. But I really would encourage you and the county executive and his team to make sure that we are benefiting from the experience of these other counties that have at least gone through it once if we head down this path. Go right ahead, I'm sorry.
I agree with you. And, there is not one single source that is going to reach every voter. So we definitely do agree we have to tackle this from many different faces. Like I said, social media, print, TV, et cetera. So that in a nutshell, is the plan that we're looking at over the next several months as the other counties release reports and information. We've already been in on a phone call with a couple of those counties regarding their outreach. So are you looking for more specifics? Or
I'm just curious. So have you heard anything at this point that said, what people say that worked well for them was, is there a fill in the blank there?
Yeah. Have you heard anything yet?
Yes. So as Shannon alluded to, we had staff, in particular our outreach staff, in contact with those counties, and they really emphasized that the blank in your, what really worked was blank was partnerships with community-based organizations and other community partnerships. And so, that was one of the things we started doing and focusing on when we were doing our focus groups that we reported on at a prior FGOC, was finding community organizations that like the League and others that are involved on these issues, and starting to set up those relationships to get for the focus groups to get us into their meetings and doing presentations and starting to talk about people, having them fill out our kind of focus group surveys and saying, okay, what parts about this make sense to you and what parts don't. And then those are going to be relationships that then we can further leverage as we move into the implementation phase in terms of setting up forums, setting up demonstrations, just pointing us in the right direction of other community outreach venues and events. And I think that's something that we're going to really focus on. Another thing along those lines is obviously our county has the Citizens Advisory Commission, which is another on elections, which is another kind of conduit into the community, and that group has their own standing subcommittee for outreach. And so we've presented to them on VCA before, and already begun strategizing with them.
I'm going to offer two opinions, two recommendations, two exhortations, whatever. One, both obviously for the Registrar of Voters, one particularly pointed, though, towards the county executive and his team as we look ahead on these issues. The first, which is sort of specific to the Registrar of Voters and the outreach effort, I do think it will be important if we make this change to be able to articulate to the public why we're doing this. So, first and foremost is, you used to do it this way, now it's going to be this way, and making sure people know that there's a change and how to use the new system. But presumably we will have done that for a series of reasons because we believe there's some benefit to the public. And I'm not saying that most members of the public are going to want to hear our 6 good reasons why we went down that path if we do. But I think having a good answer to the why on earth are you people changing the system we've had for the last 50 years is going to be important for the folks, so that people understand that it's something that wasn't just a new burden or that no one's taking away their polling place. I just think there need to be good answers to those questions for the folks who ask them, even if they are modest in their number. The second point I want to make is that while I think this is not going to be a one-time only event, I think you're going to have to do some outreach if we go down this path, not just in 2020, for example, but in the next election or two before it becomes the new normal. Is I do think you're going to need a substantial one-time only budget in order to do this. And I'm going to emphasize the one-time only after having said I think it's going to require 2 or 3 trips to the voters to communicate this. But I think this first time out in particular, we're just going to have to accept the fact that if we make this change, it's going to require some commitment of funds to make sure that we really do penetrate. This is a busy valley with a lot of people who, are busy, struggling to fit 25 hours worth of a day into a 24-hour day, and I think capturing their attention, particularly the first time out, is going to be a challenge. So I'll just plant that seed on your behalf with the county executive today, if I may. Okay? All right. Apparently, we're not going to get an argument about more resources.
Yeah, I was to just say thank you. We've been discussing that several months in our office about the upcoming budget. So.
Yeah. All right. Then recommendation 5.1 was to conduct an alternate residency confirmation purge process annually rather than every other year. We got, I thought, a very helpful clarification from the Registrar of Voters, Ms. Olof, about why, given the transition to biennial elections with folks almost all, with a few minor exceptions in that note, that it may no longer make sense the way it once did. Were you persuaded by that?
Yes, I was.
All right, then I won't belabor that, except to say thank you again for the the information. And then a couple of other points where there may not have been differences of opinion or an unwillingness or inability to implement, but just that I thought were topics worth a moment or two of discussion here. Section 6 deals with addressing extra help needs, and both 6.1, which deals with employee services and election-specific extra help job requirements, and then 6.2 that also deals with employee services agencies to develop a limited number of partial year positions in the registrar's budget. How far along in that process are we? Is it pretty well done? And is it working? Because I think, as we talked with you over the last now 5-6 years that I've been back on the board, we talked a lot about the fact that, hey, we got to find a way to do this more quickly, not have results lagging over a period of days and weeks if we can avoid it. That meant more people on the job for longer hours. The question was, who are those people and where are we going to find them and how are you going to maintain quality control? So 6.1 and 6.2 go to both extra help as well as partial year. How's that working out for us? That's my question.
Okay. Well, regarding 6.1 on the extra help worker classifications, we've already completed that and developed 3 new extra help classifications, and I'm thinking of developing one more, but we currently have an election worker 1, an election worker 2, an election worker - warehouse. Those were the titles to represent stock clerk and material handlers, our main positions. So ESA was very helpful, and we worked through that, and those are already implemented as official job specs. They have been recruited for, and we currently have some EWs, election workers, working in our office as far as the positions. So I may be bringing one more position regarding voting centers and stuff back at later. As far as the part year codes, so I believe there's a typo in our response on 6.2. I could. It says there that the budget approved 13 part year codes. It's 26 part year codes equivalent to 13 full-time employees. So I'm sorry, we had a typo in our response. Just want to point that out.
Thank you.
We implemented and hired part year codes this year.
And excuse the interruption, because this year is an election year?
Correct. We had, in our plan, scheduled on having them basically there for an even numbered calendar year, which is the last half of a fiscal year from January to June, and then the first half of the next fiscal year from July to December. To be quite honest, as well, always am, we're currently having some issues on retaining those part year codes. This is our first year doing them, and we're going to put together some facts and information after the end of the year and analyze this. What is happening that I'm seeing is applicants are taking the part year codes, and then within a month, 2-3 months, it depends, within so many months, are then applying and moving on to full-time jobs within the county. So we're
Excuse me, are those full-time jobs elsewhere in the county or in the ROV organization?
elsewhere in the county. I mean, if we had an opening, they could apply like anyone else. But so we're going to study that at the end of this year to see how successful that was, and may be putting a budget request to consider to add some more part years so we can make them full-time equivalents. But so we have hired, we do have part year codes working, and we're going to analyze those at the end of the year.
And do the folks seem to be leaving because they want full-time employment rather than partial year employment? Is that really what this is about?
Correct. One young person that I was speaking to stated, in January I have bills to pay and I need to find a full-time job instead of a part-year job.
Okay. Moving on to a different issue. I am just pleased that if I read this correctly, and I'm looking at page 9 of 10 in your report, which is packet page 14 for those of us working from the packet, and I'm going to, the great thing about numbers is you can recast them to make the case you want them to make, so I'm going to do that, just full disclosure. The issue that we had discussed some years ago, Ms. Boucher, about people dropping off their ballots, even though they were, in theory, vote by mail, but then dropping them off at the polling places for whatever combination of reasons. And of course, I am focused on the postage paid envelopes because that was a small cause I championed. We now have gone from 28% of the ballots being dropped off at the polling place to 18.9. Am I reading that right? I think I was frankly surprised that it was ever as high as that, if I remembered it.
Correct.
So let me just restate that. In the olden days, 5 years ago, 28 out of 100 ballots that we got at the county in an election were vote-by-mail ballots that somebody dropped off at a polling place.
Please do. Go ahead.
I believe the way to state it would be out of the vote-by-mail ballots that were returned, 28 out of 100, 28%
Great.
of them.
Okay,
were
no,
done
that's helpful.
Yeah.
And while you've said, well, that number's down to 18.9, and that's a 9% decrease, I actually think it's a more impressive decrease than that, because the way I look at it is that means roughly a third of the ballots that used to be dropped off at the polling place are no longer being dropped off. They're coming through the mail, and that means that we have a third the problem we used to have of having those things show up on election night when they are part of the problem in terms of delaying. I know I have a point of view on this, but is that an accurate description?
Yes, at least we're going more from like 150,000 in one day to 100,000 in one day, which
Yeah,
is
no,
an
that's
improvement. Yes.
Good. And then the remaining 100,000 we're getting to more effectively because we have more machines, we have more shifts, and we have more people on the job, yes?
That is correct.
Okay. I don't think I have any other questions on this. Ms. Solif, do you have anything else in the area where the issue of follow-up, which is why we have these follow-up conversations a year later, is noteworthy?
My only thought was to just make a suggestion in terms of the outreach, which would be that you might consider targeting churches and some of the senior citizen facilities directly, trying to organize some sort of communication through that.
Definitely.
To that point, do we know who the 25%, roughly 25% are, who have chosen not to go to vote by mail, regular vote by mail, permanent vote by mail, whatever your acronym is these days? And are they demographically different than the folks who are permanent vote by mails? Are they older, younger?
I don't know the age demographics off the hand, although we can have access to that data. I do know that there's pretty stark geographic distributions within the county where.
And excuse the interruption. My recollection is that the North County, where I represent folks, the number is pretty high in terms of vote by mail. Yeah.
Yeah, North County is very high. The kind of Montserrat, Los Gatos area tends to be higher vote by mail. Some parts of San Jose, like more central and east San Jose, tend to be more shifted towards polling place, and South County, like Morgan Hill, Gilroy, are much more slanted towards polling place voters.
Well, I would just ask, as you're doing the outreach, to think about, the folks who are going to, as I say, the folks who are already doing vote by mail, not so much of a change, frankly, for them. They're still going to get their vote by mail ballot, and they're still going to vote by mail for the most part. I do think we should be asking ourselves, who are the folks who are used to having a polling place who may be disoriented or unaware if their polling place as they see it is taken away from them as they see it, and that's a group of folks we're going to want to target the outreach to. So if we can figure out who those folks are, the folks who are really going to experience a different election process, I think that would be helpful and important at the time. All right. Thank you very much. Then ultimately what we will do is, unless you have any other comments, and if you do, we're happy to take them, we're going to put this on our next meeting agenda as a formal receipt of the report without further discussion at the time. But anything else that you want to share with us today, just for the record?
Nope, believe that's it. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you very much. Then that completes item number 4. I have cards on item numbers 5 and 6, but those items have been deferred to a subsequent meeting. So I'm going to put those aside because they are not on today's agenda. And then that will take us next to item number 7. And item number 7 is the Sustainability Master Plan. Welcome. And Dr. Smith, you want to introduce your staff? You want your staff to introduce themselves? How would you like to proceed?
Good afternoon.
All right, we need a functioning microphone. There you go. Go to it.
Yeah, sorry. Good afternoon, Dr. Susan Gilbert Miller, Office of Sustainability Director. You have before you the update to the sustainability report and relating to the Sustainability Master Plan, and also it has notable updates with the environmental stewardship goals and sustainability and climate defense programs. And this particular report covers a fairly short period, but in actuality, it's picking up also on an off-agenda report from last month, so it's really fairly comprehensive in terms of July 23rd to August 31st.
Okay. First, let me say I think you've done a marvelous job of finally bringing some rational structure to the reporting process, which was baffling even me as the chair of the committee previously. So good for you on that.
Thank you.
Good for all of us. The next thing I would say is, am I reading the county tree preservation ordinance, which I gather has gone through Hewlett and is now at the county council's office? Does this involve amending the process by which someone may remove a tree?
I would actually defer to county council on that.
Mr. Mitra, are you our expert on tree removal?
I'm not an expert on tree removal, but I think I can answer the question. Yes, in general, that's true. It's imposing restrictions on the ability of people to remove trees in the county right-of-way, county property, and non-county property.
And the not county property is another way of saying private property.
That's correct.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to say, born out of many years of experience. We've all heard the expression only God can, create a tree, I think. But let me assure you that my constituents have strongly held feelings once the tree is there about what happens to it. And so this issue has come up over the years during my time on the Board of Supervisors. And occasionally we get questions from people about why don't you have ordinances that provide a greater degree of protection. But of course, one person's protection is another person's limitation on their right to do what they want with their own property. So a couple of requests as you go forward, understanding that this issue's been through Hewlett and that that's the proper committee of jurisdiction. But given this opportunity, I'm going to say two things. One is, could we ask all parties involved, whoever those parties are, to please give this a careful eye and ask, does it provide a mechanism to distinguish between what makes sense in rural parts of our county and what makes sense in the more suburban developed parts of the county? So, I'm guessing that this set of issues looks very different in more rural parts of the county, out in the foothills or in South County, than it does in San Antonio Hills in the Los Altos area, where we have single-family homes that, for all the world, look like they belong in Los Altos or in Los Altos Hills, and there are probably some folks in the planning department who would say yes, they do. But it's a very different dynamic, and I just want to make sure that we don't come in with an approach that doesn't reflect the fact that there are differences in circumstances. And how you do that, I do not know, but I'm just asking that we make sure that that's mindful. The second thing I would say is, this is one where I'm going to return to the theme of the last conversation, which is outreach, outreach, outreach. So before this item comes to the full board, I'm going to ask that you make sure that you can document this has been thoroughly shared with the larger community, because I can assure you 3 months, 6 months, a year down the road, if we've passed something that we didn't do a good job on outreach, and then we've got a neighborhood brouhaha because somebody said, what on earth are you talking about? We never heard this. You did this in the, down at the county, or up in the county, depending on which part of the county you're from. That's a problem we could and should avoid. So, and if you need help, and all of us, have made this offer at various times, if you need help doing outreach in individual districts because individual supervisors in their offices know the lay of the land a little bit better, please let us know. We'd be happy to talk to you about how we reach out to folks in the unincorporated portions of our county. And then the last question I'll just ask, and I'm going to put Mr. Mitra on the spot, and if he wants to jump off the spot, I'll be fine with that. I'm only going to just do this just because it's a little bit of fun. Mr. Mitra, so will this apply to Stanford University's unincorporated lands, all 4,000 acres of them? And if you want to get back to me on that, that's okay.
I'll take the opportunity to get off the spot and get back to you.
I look forward to that. But let me just say that that's an awfully big, oh, by the way, for us to confront late in the process. So that's another example of what I mentioned earlier of different circumstances in different places. And that's an interested party that you may want to reach out to in the conversation. Other than that, I will just offer a couple more comments. Looking at page 5 of 8, and Doctor, do you like to be called by your full hyphenated last name?
Whatever is easiest for you.
Okay, Doc, how's that? We'll do it that way. Then I'm just going to give a little shout out and a plug for Integrated Pest Management, IPM, on page 5 of 8. And really what I want to say is this is an issue that I worked on during my first tour of duty on the Board of Supervisors in the late 1990s. My observation is that it has had its ups and downs, its struggles over the years. One of the major struggles is that absent some real authority, there are various departments and agencies who view it more as a nuisance rather than an opportunity to do good work. I just want to say, I think the work is important. So I'm not going to second guess here and now how the work gets done or under what structure. But I want to say that I'm kind of constantly, as one member of 5, I'm constantly keeping my eye on this one and hoping that it's real and that it produces a tangible improvement in the way we do our work over time. Okay?
I can tell you it is real and it is producing tangible improvement.
Good. And then on the page 6 of 8, packet page 272, I read with interest your comments about the Property Assessed Clean Energy PACE program, and I gather there is a continuing effort to see if we can harmonize the various views and values of the 5-member Board of Supervisors and reconcile some of the concerns. I'm going to tell you, frankly, I've given up, but I wish you Godspeed. I wish you well, and I hope that you prove me an unreasonably pessimistic member of the board. But we've had this one in front of our board, I think at least 2 or 3 times, if not more, and always sort of end up stuck again. If you can get us unstuck, I'd be delighted. But I myself have just sort of said, doesn't look like it's going to happen. So good for you, and thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I'd like to also acknowledge County Council's role in helping with the getting unstuck part.
Okay. Thank you to County Council as well, because it's a thorny one, given the concerns that our board has raised. That is all that I have. Do you have anything else that you would like to share or highlight or say, oh, by the way, Supervisor, I hope you noticed whatever?
Just that I wanted to acknowledge that there's the Global Climate Summit currently occurring with lots of events happening, all directed at sustainability and looking at reductions of greenhouse gas emissions. And I am quite proud of the work that this county is already doing in those regards.
Thank you. And I think in your role particularly, you know, we're going to be asking you, as we look at some of these, I'll call them stretch goals, you know, are they reasonable? Are they feasible? Can we get there? You may or may not know, when I was in the legislature, was the author of the 20% renewable portfolio standard for 2010, and then 33% for 2020. And I remember, you know, those numbers now, you know, are numbers we're about to see in our rearview mirror as we go towards 50 and we hope 100. But at the time, people said, oh, that can't be done. And of course, what we've learned is it not only can be done, it's being done. But on a whole range of these issues, you know, we're going to want to ask you, can it be done? Is that a matter of uncertainty? And we're trying to, you know, use our targets and our goals as technology drivers along with others who are pursuing the same path. So please be prepared to have those questions come your way when we get there.
Absolutely. And to that point, I will say diesel free by 33, which you took off and put on, you put onto consent on Tuesday, is definitely one of those areas where we'll be doing a feasibility study and a cost analysis to see what that would really take to achieve that.
All right. Thank you very much. I have nothing. Go ahead.
No, I just said
I have
thank you.
nothing else on this item, which is item number 7. And I'm looking at the rest of the staff, and we don't have cards on this item. So we will say thank you very much. And as I mentioned, we'll put this formal action, which is to receive the report on our next meeting of the FGOC, and then it will be, then you will have been officially received if once we take action. All right?
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That takes us then to item number 8. And item number 8 is an opportunity to receive report on options to streamline the Technology Services and Solutions Department's and the Employee Services Agency's work relating to streamlining the TSS hiring process. So could we ask the two people who are here to introduce themselves and go right ahead and present? Forgive me, we will go ahead and take the comments now and then move through the report and any back and forth. I believe I have only one card, and it's from an unnamed person. Thank you.
Thank you. I know you're going to be talking about technology, and I want to talk about, as you march along and you implement technology, what that actually looks like. The technology, for instance, of the badge swiping in and out of county buildings, that would apply to the district attorney's office, and that would be subject to the public records request. I actually have a public records request in, and that seems to be causing some turmoil. That is obviously an additional cost to the county. Every time you implement something, no matter what form, it does create a record that is subject to California Public Records Act. And further, I don't know that you've considered, it also produces evidence that is mandatory to be given up in exculpatory evidence in criminal cases and in civil cases. For instance, you have an employee in your claims unit from Victim Witness Services who was engaged with an improper sexual relationship with one of their subordinates. That now has a family law case, and at a future meeting, I'd be happy to go over the income and expense declarations that are in the court file that I was able to find on that. Your employee is now involved in, your former employee, or I don't know the status of him, is now involved in a family law case where domestic violence is concerned. The wife, who was abused, is without a lawyer. The husband, who apparently is reporting that he has no money and was the victim's claims specialist in the district attorney's office, who had a prior bankruptcy and had a number of problems managing his own money that we trusted with no background check to manage claims for victims in the future, has a little bit of a problem now. And now some of that evidence about when he was having a relationship with his subordinate comes into play in the family law case, in the civil case, and everything else. So as you implement policies and procedures for technology, be sure you consider that. Thank you.
All right, I believe that's the only card we have on this item, and just as a courtesy, I should indicate we have cards on item 10 and 13, which we will not be taking up today. Item 10, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be deferred to a subsequent meeting. And item 13 is a consent calendar item. And if you are the speaker on item 13, actually, I will come back before the end to see if somebody wants to speak on that item before we adjourn. Okay. All right, now back to the item at hand, which is item number 8, the streamlining of TSS hiring. Who would like to present? What would they like to present?
Thank you, Chair Simidian. John Mills, Employee Services Agency Director.
Ann Duncan, Chief Information Officer.
Thank you both.
And the report before the committee is a brief overview of where we are with both the Information Technology Career Compass classification study and also with the Lean Process Improvement Project related to IT hiring. There is also a discussion at the end of the report related to efforts that the department has instituted to better manage and anticipate vacancies, and also related to onboarding, exit interviews, and their screening process during their interview process for recruitments. So that's a broad overview of the report, and depending on where you want to take the conversation,
sure,
we're available.
I have had a chance to review the material. I do have questions. I think perhaps the most direct path to greater enlightenment for at least this committee member would be if I just ask you some very direct questions. I will indicate I found the report and the PowerPoint that was attached, shall we say, acronym heavy, and that's okay with me. If they work for you and your teams, you know, no harm, no foul. They aren't always readily apparent to me as a layperson, so I may be asking you along the way, what does that mean, please? And then after you tell me, I may say, okay, now that I know the words, what does that mean, please? But let's try and make our way through it. And I'm going to ask some questions in a slightly basic way to try and get a bigger picture sense of this. As I look at the very first page of the staff report, which is page, I believe, 1 of 4, and it's packet page 275 for those who are working from the packet pages. Under background, it indicates that the scope of the IT classification study is approximately 900 plus positions, 800 plus positions of these positions are filled. I want to go back to a really basic question. So we're doing a classification study, yes. Why is that important? How will the world be a better place once the classification study is completed?
So the way that the world will be a better place is that we will be better able to hire, compensate, and retain our employees. So we will have job descriptions that better fit industry standard job descriptions. We've worked hard with ESA to develop a complete set of job descriptions that will meet our needs and that match the kinds of jobs people have in the outside of the county, in the rest of industry, in the rest of Silicon Valley and the country, so that it's easier for us to hire because our previous job descriptions were pretty vague and didn't really match the industry. That our compensation will be aligned. Our base compensation will be aligned with the market. We're not going to be able to compete with Google on total compensation, but we will be aligned with the market as a base pay. And then we can have a conversation about, here's the great reasons to work for the county from a place where people can afford to make that choice. And we'll be able to retain people, develop and grow them. So that would be my summary. John, you want to add?
Yeah, I would just add from an ESA perspective that the benefit to the class study for us will be to have updated job specifications that will help us better screen candidates and will also help us in working with the department, because historically with the outdated job specifications that we've been working with that Ms. Duncan referenced, we've had a difficult time trying to find a job spec that fits what the work that the department needs to get done. And so what we have sort of been handicapped in doing is finding sort of the next best fit that we currently have, recruiting for that, going through a process, and not always necessarily coming out the other end with the person who has the skills that the department needs to do the work that they needed to be done in the beginning. So from that standpoint, having updated job specifications that we can recruit against will be a better match for what the department needs.
So to take all of that and bundle it together, if this works the way you hope and anticipate, we'll be better equipped to attract and retain the people we need, and they will be a better fit with the actual job requirements of the jobs for which they've been hired. Is that a fair summary of what we're trying to accomplish here?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then looking at page 2 of 4 on the report, there was a reference to the fact that the county has proposed grandparenting provisions allowing qualified employees who may not have the required education to move into their proposed classifications. The county is committed that no one will suffer a reduction in pay nor lose their job or their status because of this study. My recollection is we had some people in these chambers who were anxious about this at some point in the process. Has that anxiety disappeared, been reduced? Where are we in that? And share.
My guess would be we're probably at peak anxiety right now because we're getting ready to release the report. And we're getting close to the point where people are going to find out where they're going to land. We've worked very hard to alleviate people's concerns, but they're going to remain concerned until they see the real information, and we anticipate having that to them at the end of the month.
And could you share the basis for that anxiety if you've told folks that they're not going to be receiving a pay reduction or lose their job or their status because of the study? Is there anxiety because they'll believe that when they see it, or is there anxiety because they're worried about some other things that I should be aware of?
There are probably a little bit of both. I think there's some level of I'll believe you when I actually see it, and there's also a level of anxiety of will I be placed in the job I think I should be? Who am I going to be working for? Am I going to get a pay increase? All those sorts of questions until they know who their boss is going to be, what their job title is going to be, how much money they're going to make. There's a lot of nervousness.
Okay.
Yeah, I would only add that I do think it's largely attributed to the "I'll believe it when I see it" phenomenon that you referenced, because there are protections in the merit system for people who are reclassified that provide that there won't be a reduction in pay. But I just think there's sort of always a level of trust that needs to be there for people to actually, believe it when they see it type thing. And then also to the point about the people maybe not having the education but still having the experience, that's related to the job classifications that are being developed and having a training and experience equivalent to the education requirement, all of which, to Ms. Duncan's point, will be clear when the classification study report and the drafts of the new job specifications are released to the bargaining units. They'll see it all.
All right. Going to the next page of the report, page 3 of 4, and bear with me here, it's under TSS departmental progress. There's an indication, the language is, it is important to note that the Information Technology Career Compass, something I do not pretend expertise on, is currently taking precedence over speeding up the recruitment process. So the short, simple version of what the Information Technology Career Compass is what again?
The classification study that we were just discussing.
Great. And so right now, that is at the top of your to-do list. Get that done, get those issues resolved. And the hope is that with a little more time, and once that's done, then you'll be able to devote more attention to the speeding up of the recruitment process, yes?
Yes. Well, and I do think from ESA's perspective, time and investment spent on the classification study process is where we should be putting our focus, because we feel that once we have the updated job specifications that we can recruit to, that a lot of the recruitment challenges that we've been experiencing with the department will be addressed by having current job specifications.
Okay. Let me ask then that you go to the document that is, I'll call it a PowerPoint presentation that starts with project summary and results. Do you know the document that I'm talking about? In my case, it's packet page 285, has some stick figures on the front. Okay. Mr. Mills, are you smiling because you drew those yourself, or just no? No. All right. As I look at the project summary after the cover page, talks about initial process view included HHS, communications, TSS, and ESA. Focus was pared down to TSS and ESA, eliminating background checks. Visibility target was set for 50%. What does that mean? Does somebody?
And you'll have to allow that both of us were not in the details of this project. But the visibility target is basically the ability to see the entire process end-to-end. There was some recognition that there are pieces that are not deeply understood at this point, so they were trying to work on the parts that they could fully understand and dig into at this point in terms of not literally the process steps, but the outcomes of various events.
Visibility to whom?
To the project team, right? So they recognized they would not be able to gather all the data for all events in the process, and so they tried to see if they could get about 50% of the data that made available to them.
And then if you can tell me, what does improvement target was set for 30%? That means what?
That's a little easier to explain.
Thanks.
So that means 30% process improvement. So a 30% reduction in overall process cycle time.
Okay, so that really does go to the cycle time question, and the goal is to say if it took this long, we want to try and get to 70% of that number. Okay, good. And what's your level of optimism that that's going to be achievable at this point?
So the team found a number of solutions, and I don't know if the exact numbers are in the slides, but in some parts, they segment, I believe, 3 or 4 different types of processes, and some of them are going to do better than 30%, some of them worse. Do you remember have the specifics in front of you there?
Yeah, I mean, basically, my understanding is what the team explored was 3 different types of recruitments based on the type of exam that is used in the recruitment, because depending on the type of exam, there are different steps before and after in the recruitment. And so they measured basically the time that it took for each step in each of those 3 types of recruitments, and then a period of time went by where they engaged in actually doing the work, and then they measured it again to see based on what the proposed improvements were, if they had any effect. And that is what gets to the 30% number that you were referencing earlier.
Thank you. If we flip a page or two, and I think we're looking at page 10 of the handout now, packet page 288, it says project results in the upper left-hand corner, quantitative improvements estimated, written 29.59, competitive rating 18.6, transfer band 43.18%. I have no idea what any of that data is supposed to be telling me, so if you could help decode that for me, that would be great.
Sure. So those 3 bullet points are the 3 exam types. So basically the 3 types of recruitments that were studied. So recruitments that involve a written exam, recruitments that involve a competitive rating as the exam, which is basically where HR, in partnership with the department, identifies certain skills or certain certifications, experience that candidates have, and then quantify those and then score each candidate based on those quantifications for each quality.
And do these quantitative improvements go, again, to time of the process?
Yes.
Okay. So it's not that someone's writing is going to be 29.59% better, or that we'll have a 29.59% improvement in the caliber of the people that we get. It's that going through that exercise, we think we can improve the timeline by 29.59%, yes?
Yes.
Right.
Okay. And transfer band means what again?
That's a specific type of recruitment that's just an internal transfer recruitment, and transfer band is the term that refers to whether or not the applicant is within the quote-unquote transfer band, which basically means within 15% of the salary of the classification to which they are seeking to transfer.
And I want to say this in a positive way, not a negative way, but the transfer band, if we have the quantitative improvement estimate of 43.18%, I read that as saying we think there's a whole lot of room for improvement in terms of how long it currently takes to move people through that system, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'd add specifically that we believe there are places we see that we can improve it, right? That there are concrete things we know we can do.
Okay, and then the one last page, project results on the next item, qualitative improvements, increased visibility and individual enablement. What does that phrase mean in this context?
So this, to me, in my observation, speaks to sort of the improvements in the working relationship and sort of the culture, I guess, around the process between HR and the department. The increased visibility speaks to just the mere fact by engaging in this process and in this conversation and sort of coming to the table together to tease it apart and put it back together in a better way. We've increased the visibility of the steps of the process to both sides. So now HR has a better understanding of the pieces of the process that take place within the department and how those are handled and can be improved. And by the same token, the department has a better understanding of the pieces of the process that HR administers.
Is that another way of saying it's less confusing than it was 6 months ago?
Yes.
Okay. Intense focus on collaboration versus silos. Does that mean that we're trying to get the different players who are part of the process to all work well with one another?
Yes.
Better process controls. I'm going to take a stab at this one without any help. Does that mean we're trying to get people to actually do what they're supposed to do?
Yes.
Follow the policy, follow the guidelines, follow the rules, whatever they are supposed to follow.
And to put systematic tools in place to help them do that.
Well, and then just to add, it's more, in my mind, in my observation, it's more than just following the process and the rules, but it's basically, instituting backups and redundancies in the process so that there aren't lags in certain steps, so that there isn't sort of a single point of failure or only one person that you are relying upon to do a certain step.
Got it. I have nothing else in the way of questions at this time except the overarching question. Ms. Duncan, how long have you been with us now?
About a year and a half.
Is this giving you some cause for optimism that things are getting better?
Yes, I believe that ESA and TSS have found some really productive ways to work together through improving this process. And also, I can't say enough how much of a great partner ESA has been on ITCC for the last few months. We have been together lifting a very heavy burden, and it's been a great partnership.
Good. All right. Well, thank you both. Again, this is on our agenda in order for us to receive the report. That formal receipt will take place at the next scheduled meeting of the FGOC when a quorum is present and available to act. All right. I believe that takes us to our last item, and that is item 17, which is the report on county election and voting security privacy. And whatever we can do in an open public session, we will do in an open public session. And then if to some degree it is necessary to have a closed session, we will announce that. If we do go to closed session, we will come back briefly to report out any action items or reportable items, if indeed there are such. So, Mr. Dietrich, you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Justin Dietrich, Chief Information Security Officer.
Okay. Anything, keeping in mind this is a function of our desire to sort of stay on top of election security given the national and international climate and our own concerns about making sure we do what we can here at the county to keep the system secure. Anything that you or Ms. Boucher and her team want to share in an open public session that you can appropriately share?
Yeah, I think overall, once again, we're making a lot of progress that goes above and beyond, I think, what a lot of other entities are doing. So I think, putting this kind of spotlight on this item definitely helps all of us to really make sure this is at the forefront of all of our minds and really go above and beyond to make sure that they are protected.
Is there somebody elsewhere in either the state or the nation that is known for doing, cutting edge work in this field at the local level, the county level, I mean, somebody saying, yeah, they really got it nailed in Keokuk, Iowa, we should be talking with them, or, somewhere else?
I'm not aware of any entity, but I know a lot of the federal side of the government, like DHS and Secretary of State, are now starting to roll out additional programs and guidance for registered voters offices that we're paying
And
attention.
again, understanding that there's some things that are appropriate for closed session, how much of that is relevant or helpful to the job we have at the county level, which is to actually count the votes? Let me tell you why I ask, and forgive me, I can't remember. I think I may have mentioned to some or all of you, over the summer I had the opportunity to go to the Aspen Security Institute, which I attend every summer, and this year for the first time they actually had a panel on election security, and there was, to your point, Mr. Dietrich, a lot of conversation about what was happening at the federal level and what was happening at the state level. But I stood up and said, all due respect, we've got the responsibility to actually conduct elections and count the votes is pretty much a local responsibility at the county level, and in some cases, I gather, the municipalities. And I think it's easy for people to lose sight of, but if someone really wants to wreak havoc on the system, this is where the votes get counted. So it sounds like most of what you're hearing about is at the state and national level. And are we hearing from CSAC? Are we hearing from the NACO, the National Association of Counties? Are we hearing from League of California Cities or the national counterpart? Anybody? Dr. Smith, I see you leaning in.
I'm not sure if they're having any technical discussions, but in general, what I've been hearing at the county exec level is really pretty general information, sort of warning, prevention, those kinds of things. No specific technical recommendations. I don't know, Justin, have you heard anything?
Nothing specific to I think to that level, but just to kind of highlight those still, I think just focusing on ballot counting, and certainly an important piece of this, but there's just looking at all the stuff that has happened in past elections just very recently in the news, so certainly for public forum, is the interference and distraction of voters. So I recall an instance where somebody was, or where they were in some way or another broadcasted that the date of the vote had changed and a polling place changed and stuff like that. So in essence, they distracted people and possibly made some people not vote that day. So I think we definitely need to focus on counting the ballots, but if somebody can influence our election so that people don't even go to the ballot because they think the election got canceled, is also just as important. Got it.
All right, then I will say thank you for that. We do not appear to have cards from members of the public on this item. And that would take us to item number 18, which is, I believe, to turn to the County Council for a brief announcement prior to the recess to our closed session. Mr. Mitra?
So as submitting, in the absence of a quorum and the inability of the FGOC to meet in closed session, I would suggest a briefing, which could happen after adjournment of the FGOC.
All right. We can simply defer that today unless there's urgent information. There does not appear to be. I'll just say for the record, I do have confidential information in writing that's been shared, and thank you for that. Then, without objection, and I anticipate none as the only member of the committee present today, we stand adjourned. And again, we have items that were on consent. We have items that were heard today. They will come back at a subsequent meeting for formal action by 2 votes from our committee. And then there are 3 items that were deferred. We'll bring those back as well. Thank you all very much. We stand adjourned.